Hi friends! Welcome to the Overcomers, a movement and a group of people who have overcome and they've got a story. That's what the Overcomers is all about. You sharing your story. Why? Because there is power in your story and people need you. They need your voice. They need your story of hope, faith, and inspiration that where they're at right now is not the end. They need to know if you can overcome, so can they. Today, I'm excited to share with you another story of one such overcomer. So let's go check out who it is.
I'm honored to be here today with my friend, April Seekins. April, thank you so much for joining us all today.
Welcome. I love to be here.
We have a unique opportunity today to hear April's story. And April is actually my roommate, so that's why she's right next to me. April is the amazing mom to 3 awesome boys and 3 grandchildren. When you meet April today, you would have no idea all the trauma and abuse that she has been through in her journey. At age 16, she was put out on the streets. She found herself doing whatever she needed to for herself and her 3 boys to survive. Today, April is an entrepreneur and a successful owner of a photography business. And she's a huge advocate for the sex trafficked and the orphan and the widows found around our world. She has overcome fear of other people and so much trauma. I'm so excited to have her on today to share her story. But what I'm blown away most by in you, April, is how much you've overcome. And that in looking back on your journey, you can identify where the Father was and what he was doing and how he rescued you and led you out of things. And even more than that, the why that you found. The heart that you have to help other women not only find freedom, but to hear how much the Father loves them right where they're at. And her desire to help show them how is amazing. You went from literal survivor mode to having the biggest heart and eyes for the Father and those now in the same situation you used to be. So, April, tell us your story. How did you go from here to there? More importantly, tell them your story, those who are listening in with us today.
So at the age of 32, I found myself as a stripper. And at age 34, I found myself as a prostitute. I didn't ever believe that I'd ever be in that situation, but I was. I was infested with greed, anxiousness, and isolation, and fear. And I cried out to my God, and he rescued me.
Wow, friend. So you've got a lot of impactful moments and specific moments that you can remember where things happened that were pivotal. Starting with one moment when you were really young. What happened when you were really young?
Well, even before I was born, one of my mom's best friends told her that I was the result of my dad raping my mom. So trauma started at conception, and it didn't stop until I was in my early 40s. When I was around the age of 6 years old, my parents were married and together. And at that time, I was so young, I didn't really understand what was going on. But my mom was in the hallway on the floor screaming, and my dad was on top of her. And so my sister and I experienced and watched my dad rape my mom. And then when he was done, he would take the Bible and then read the scripture about submitting to your husband. And then at age 10, my dad actually raped me as well. At age 14, I was living at my dad's house, was actually the first time my mom ever kicked me out of the house. And so I went to live with my dad. And it was really interesting because, so I was in 8th grade, and I became friends with a gal that claimed that she was a Satan worshiper. We're 14 years old, 8th grade.
Wow.
Yeah. And she would just talk about like the rituals that they would do, and just and it kind of interested me because I was really interested in the spiritual world, not in being worshiping Satan, but the spiritual world in general was really interesting. So that year I ended up moving back up to the Seattle area, and right off the bat I meet another girl. She also was a Satan worshiper. 8th grade, 14 years old. I mean, how does that happen? And she would even explain to me that she would make deals with Satan in her dreams. And she'd wake up in the middle, in the morning, she'd have bruises on her body from being beat up. She says that Satan would beat her up in her dreams.
So while that was happening, something really specific happened in those years. What happened?
So it must have been on a weekend where I was just sitting at home, and this strange man knocks on the door. My mom answers, and my mom's really into her windows being perfectly clean. If they're not clean, she's cleaning them. So this man shows up at the door and tells my mom that it was her lucky day that she was cleaning windows for free that day. And so he ended up washing our windows that day. And I was in my mom's bedroom with the telephone before cell phones. And I turn around and he's right outside the window, staring at me. And the person I'm talking to on the phone, I just start cussing, or I don't even know why. Just something in me just could feel it. And so the next thing I remember us being in the living room or in the kitchen. We must have been having a snack or something. And I remember him telling me that he would fight demons in his sleep with swords. And I was like, well, how do you know that? I mean, how do you know that's even real or true? And he said he'd wake up with bruises on his body. It's crazy. And so then the next thing I remember him asking if he could pray for me. And I said, yes. And he prayed a bubble of protection over me. And he said that he wanted that bubble to stay on me until I was strong enough to fight myself. Which was really interesting. And so my friend at the time that was a Satan worshiper, she had asked me to go with her to one of those Satan churches. And I was going to go because I was like I said before, I was just interested in the whole spiritual world. But because of what happened that day, I didn't go. And that probably saved me from being raped, from being kidnapped, being put in a sex trade. I mean, sacrifice. I mean, who knows what could happen if that man didn't show up. So then he left and never saw him again.
So from a very young age, you were very aware of the spiritual realm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So you're now 16, and you're put out on the streets. What happened?
So at 16 years old, I found myself pregnant. And my mom told me that we were going to go to the doctor's office the next day to get it taken care of. And I thought she meant we were going to go for prenatal care. But no, that's not what she meant. She meant we were going to get an abortion. And I told her I wasn't going to get an abortion. And we got in this huge argument that night. And back and forth. And then she finally said, well, if you don't get an abortion, then you have 48 hours to leave. So 48 hours later, I had a bag. It was like a black trash bag with all my belongings. And she dropped me off at a payphone booth. And then she left went to the airport, went to Hawaii for 2 weeks, and left me there. And so that night, I prayed to God, and I basically, I felt like I had sinned. And I told him, I said, whatever, take me through whatever you need to take me through. Because I need to learn something there. Like, whatever I need to learn, teach me. Just don't let this be in vain. I just didn't want it to be in vain. If I had to go through this suffering, I just didn't want it to be in vain. And the reason why, he told me the reason why I was going through this was because I would help other girls that were in my same situation when I grew up.
It's so amazing that in that moment, you met me there. You were alone. You were probably really afraid. You knew you felt that way. He was, as a father, comforting you.
Absolutely. So some time went by, and then at the age of 29, I found myself as a single mom with 3 boys. I had just divorced my husband at the time that was having multiple affairs on me because of emotional and sexual abuse. At the time, I was a stay-at-home mom, so I didn't have a career or anything like that. And my 3 boys and I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. And I had to go out and find a job. So I did. I had a few different jobs. But I was barely being able to pay rent. I was barely being able to put food on the table. And I got laid off at one job. And this girl at the apartment complex that I lived at, she asked me for a ride to an interview, a job interview. And she said, "You should interview too." And I was like, "Well, what are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, I'm going to interview you to be a waitress at a strip club." And I was like, "There's no way I would ever do something like that. I've never walked into a strip club." I mean, had no interest, right? But then at the last minute, I'm like, well, what the heck? It might be kind of fun. So I did, and both of us worked that night. I worked there for about two weeks, and I found another job. I went to work for the other job. That job lasted about 14 months. And at the end of that job, we got laid off again or fired. And at that time, I had, rent was due in about a week, had no money, and I had a conversation with God. And I said, "This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go be a stripper," because I saw all these girls that were stripping and they had made all this money pretty quickly. So I said, "God, I'm going to go be a stripper." And then I asked him in tears, I was like, "Are you going to leave me? Are you going to forsake me because I'm going to decide to do this? I have to take care of my boys." I felt like I had no other choice. And I really thought he was going to leave me. And it was almost like begging him not to forsake me. And so, but what I found out is he never did forsake me. And everything that I was doing, even though I was living in sin, that he was there with me the whole time. And growing up, I was taught that if you live in sin, God's going to leave you, that he's not going to be there for you. But I found the opposite to be true.
Wow, that was so powerful and so good, because so many of us struggle with that. No matter what we're in, we think if we mess up or if we do something that he doesn't like, that he's gone, that he doesn't care anymore, that he doesn't love us. But what you're saying is you found the opposite. Yes, that's so powerful. Okay, so what happened next?
So after about a year and a half of working as a stripper, the FBI came in and closed all the clubs. They were doing an investigation for 3 years, and the owners were laundering money, and so they closed all the clubs. And so now I was like, what am I going to do now? How am I going to make money? I have 3 kids to care. So then I went into the next thing was prostitution. So when I started stripping, I made two rules for myself. The first one was I wasn't going to date because I knew that I wouldn't attract any good man. And I know a lot of girls that dated and were married to men. And sometimes they're pimps. We're a weird rule. That was my first rule. My second rule was I wasn't going to have any men around my kids at all. And then my third rule was that I was going to be sober, that I wasn't going to do drugs, that I wasn't going to, I drank a little bit when I was dancing, but when I was doing prostitution, I wasn't drinking because I had to know everything that was going on to be alert. And through all that, I felt like God really protected me. I was never raped. I was never robbed. I wasn't arrested. One of my girlfriends was arrested, and they were looking for me. They were looking for me, but I had just quit a week before she got arrested. And she told me she didn't believe in God, but she said, there must be somebody looking out for you. And even one of my other friends that didn't believe in God, they didn't even know each other. He said the exact same thing.
It was almost as if that bubble of protection that was praying over you as a child was still there.
Yes. Absolutely. Yep. I was numbed out for pretty much the whole time. But deep down, I was in a lot of pain. But I had to numb myself out so that I could function. But it started coming up here and there. So after crying out to God day and night, every day, I just didn't hear anything from him for months. It was he was silent. And then all of a sudden, I heard him say, I will take you out of this. And the reason why I'm taking you out of this is because you can help other girls get out too. And then he went on to tell me that there's going to be this woman. She's going to be in a leadership position. And you're going to confess to her what you're doing, and she's going to help you. And I'm going to tell you who she is and when you're going to tell her. And I was like, I heard this in my mind. I was like, what is this? What is going on? Just popped up in my life. And so I kind of forgot about it. And God reminded me that one of my desires growing up was to have a marriage and to have a family and have a healthy marriage. And I knew if I stayed doing what I was doing, that I would not have that. And then he started telling me I was better than this. I didn't want this kind of life. I wanted a better life. And so I had to do something. So I started researching about what I could do. And I decided I was going to be a real estate investor. And I found this real estate course, the best real estate course. It was amazing. It really, really was. And it was a year-long real estate course. And I felt like I was crying out to God on a daily basis that I needed change. I needed to do something different. And I felt, but instead of working with him, I felt like I had to prove something to him. I am serious. I'm going to change this. I'm going to make it different. And I'm going to prove to you that I'm good enough. And so I saved $50,000 in 10 months. And I quit prostitution and started my real estate business. 6 months later, I had made zero money, and I was broke. So I went back into doing prostitution again. And this time, I started asking God, well, why am I making money? If you don't want me living this kind of lifestyle, why didn't you help me? Why didn't you make it go? I worked hard. I studied. I did everything I knew that I could do. So I just didn't understand. But the one thing I didn't give up, though, I just kept asking him, what do you want me to do? How can I get out of this? And so I started, I even Googled, stuff to try to find like programs where I could get help. Nothing came up on Google, which is super weird because when you think it would, right? But it didn't. Nothing came up. And I'm like, so I was like, well, what can I do? And so I was like, well, I need to read biographies. I need to find some other people that were living in a deep place and how they overcame those deep places. And I need to read biographies to find out how to get out of this dark place that I was in that I didn't think I could ever get out. Like I didn't see the way to get out of it. And so I went to the Christian bookstore and I said to myself, okay, I'm just going to look for one book. I've read hundreds of books before on self-help, and I just wanted one book. And so I walked down the aisle, and the top aisle, there's this book, and there's this lady on it with a big smile on her face. And it was called Spirit-Driven Success. And I was like, no, I don't need another self-help book. I need a biography. So I just kept walking by, and so I did find my book I wanted to read. And that book, I cried through the whole book because it was crazy story. And so I started walking back, and there's her book smiling at me again. I'm like, no. But then it felt like it was like talking to me and saying, buy me. And so at the last minute, I said, what the heck? Why not? So I did. And I read that book, and in the book, it kept talking about first steps to success. And when I finished reading, I'm like, oh, I doubt she's really doing those anymore. She's probably up to this. But I'll go to her website and see what's going on. So I did. And the next event was 2 weeks later in Dallas. And I thought about it for about 30 minutes. And then I said, okay, I'm signing up. I got to go. And so I did. And I went to her event alone. I went to her event without ever seeing her on any TV show. Didn't see her on Facebook. Didn't even hear her voice yet. I just went because I had read her book. My first steps was in February of 2011. And at that time, she was doing first steps every 4 weeks. And then when she did Dynasty, after Dynasty, 2 weeks later, she would do another first steps. And before Dynasty, it was a first steps too. So it was pretty good. She was doing a lot back then. So I went to my first steps. I was totally blown away. I had been to a lot of other events before, learning skills. But this one blew me away. And what I really liked most about her first steps and what drew me to her first steps was the spiritual part. And I just needed more of that because I knew that was my ticket out of where I was at. So I went to 14 first steps and Dynasty events for 14 months. I went for the next 14 months. There must have been around 14 events. And then in May of 2012 was Dynasty. And she does a survey. And you have a question that you can ask her. And this particular event, I kept hearing God tell me, you need to confess. You need to confess. You need to tell her what's going on. And I'm like, and so I was like, is this for real? Do I really need to do this? I was in tears like all week, like back and forth. Like, should I really do this? Is this for real? So it was so strong that I just said, fine, I'll just do it. So I did. And then at that event, at the spiritual equipping, well, let me go back a little bit. On the way to the event, God was speaking to me. He was saying, wonder if I tell you to quit cold turkey and never go back again. And my idea was that I was going to build a photography business and keep doing what I was doing And then when the photography business made enough money, then I would quit. But God had other plans. And so when I went to that event, I had no plans on quitting what I was doing. So at the spiritual equipping, Dan comes up to me and puts her hand on my forehead, calls out my name, and says, "You need to quit what you're doing right now." And so God was prepping me the whole time on my way there. But I wonder if I tell you got to quit now. I'm like, no. That's not you telling me that. That's just impossible. How am I going to pay my bills? Right? My biggest fear was being homeless. That was my biggest fear. And so from that event, I had to let go of that fear. And so basically I said, if I become homeless, then I become homeless. But I'm not going to go back to that again. And I cut all ties and I quit cold turkey. Like a drug abuser quitting cold turkey. Crazy.
Wow. That's huge. That is a big change. So what happened after you made that decision?
So I just started building a photography business. And in the fourth month of my business, I made $4,000 that month. And then within 4 years, my business was generating over 6 digits a year. And then I ended up adding another business, which is a photo booth business. So I had 2 businesses with subcontractors, training people. That was another skill set I had to learn.
What do you think would have happened if you didn't listen to his voice in that moment?
So I believe that if I hadn't quit, that the wrath of God would have been upon me. Just like the Israelites in the Bible, God gave them grace for so long. He allowed them to sin, and he was there, and he allowed it for a while. And then he said, "Turn back to me or else." So that's where I was at. That's what I was feeling. So, yeah. I think that I would have been arrested. I think that, maybe I would have been beat up, raped. I think his grace upon me would have been gone.
But he totally did what he said he would do. And what did he say? I'm going to take you out.
Yes.
And he showed you the moment when.
Yes.
And you answered.
Yes. So since my 20s, I have been praying for mentors in my life. And like a mother and father figure, because I really didn't know that. And I always missed out on that. I always was praying for that, but I could never find the right fit. I'd try with people, but they would just let me down, or it just didn't fit. And so finally, in March of 2020, I was doing a photo shoot, and there was this couple. And after the photo shoot, the man, his name is Marcel, asked if he could give me a word of wisdom. And so he did. And everything he said was right on. I was shocked. And so from that moment, we started building a relationship. And I have been mentoring with them once a week. It's been totally amazing through this COVID-19 thing. My photo booth business is totally gone at the moment. There's no business going on. My photography business is probably at 50% of what it used to be. But 2020 has been one of the best years for me. I have more assets than I've ever had. I moved, and I just feel like I've been redirected into a different direction to where God's taking me. And it's in a new season, a new place. I was on one road, and now I'm kind of pivoted into a different place.
So these things that you learned, like you just said a few seconds ago, that now you have assets that you didn't have before. Like, where did you learn to do things like that? Was that at these conferences too?
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
So one of the things I learned was to stop spending money on stupid stuff. So now I'm taking my money and I'm investing it into things. I invested money into myself, into learning and skill sets. I've learned, there's so much things that I've learned from those events that I went to. One of the biggest things that I learned is God, the place that you're at right now is where you're supposed to be. Before that, I always was looking at my life like, I should be here. I shouldn't be here. I should be there. I should have already accomplished this. But I got to a point where, no, you're at where you're supposed to be. And that's what you're supposed to work from. And then another one was stop stomping on your sprouts. That's a big one for me. You work really hard, you get nothing, and you get these little tiny results, and then you get mad. Because they're tiny results. But those little tiny results can turn into a big orchard if you take care of them. And that was huge. That was probably the number one reason why I was able to take my business to a 6-digit income without quitting. Because before I would just quit because I get too frustrated.
So I know you're a huge advocate of a specific organization, and they help rescue kids from the sex trafficking industry. And I know you have a huge heart for that. So can you tell us more about that? Because I know a lot of people listening to your story are wondering, how can they help? How can they come alongside of you, but other girls too? So can you tell us more about this organization?
Yes, there's an organization called King's Ransom. And specifically, they have a program on there that they're rescuing 1,000 girls from the sex trade. I'm sure they're rescuing way more than that. That's just what the tagline is called, Rescue 1,000. And they give 100% of their giving goes to the cause. They have a corporate person that takes care of all the expenses of running the fundraiser.
That's amazing. So 100% of what someone gives to this organization actually goes to help these girls. It doesn't go to pay for anything else.
Yes.
That's amazing. I've never heard of a nonprofit like that. I don't know if you have. That's also why we support them at the Overcomers. So I know there's people listening today that can relate to some of the journey that you've had. They've maybe had the same conversations with God that you have had. What would you tell that person who maybe related specifically to something you shared, some struggle, some pain, some feeling that you shared? What would you say to them today?
I would tell them to not give up and to keep calling on God, keep praying, keep pouring out your heart, and wait for Him to answer you. He will show you the direction. He'll show where it looks impossible, He can make it possible. And I would also tell you to get to one of Danny Johnson's First Steps to Success. It will blow your mind, and it will teach you the skills to get to the next level in your life.
Just like you did.
Yes.
I am so proud of you, my friend. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. You did an amazing job. It was so real. It was so authentic. It was so powerful. And you know why it was powerful? It was powerful because of your own journey with the Father and how He has taken you out of so much trauma, so much pain, so much heartache, and brought you to this place where you
so much peace. And I see this peace on you every single day, sharing the place with you. You are a woman of peace and a woman of power, and you're going to help so many young girls be taken out soon. And when they're taken out, they're going to know where to go next, and they're going to start a relationship with God. The one who can walk with them just like He has walked with you. I am proud of you, and I'm excited for what this next season is going to be for you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And remember, if you want to come alongside these girls and help those who are being rescued from the sex trade and help feed and house orphans and widows around the world with King's Ransom Foundation, you can look them up at www.kingsransomfoundation.org. You can get involved today and change someone's life. Seriously, you did an amazing job.
Oh, God.
Thank you again. And I love you.
Oh, I love you too.
Wow, wasn't that powerful? Do you have an overcomer story? Do you know someone who needs to hear this message? Please share this video on your social platforms and tag us so we know who you are. Stay tuned as we share more overcomer stories in the weeks ahead. We're looking for you. We're looking for the overcomers. Join us. Let's come together as the overcomers. Start sharing your story. We have multiple ways you can start getting involved and repping the movement, repping your story of what He has done in your life. For example, we've got journals. You can start writing your story down. Start getting it out of your head and on paper. We've got bracelets. Start repping that we're a group that are coming together to inspire people. We've got t-shirts and sweatshirts to not only remind yourself that you're filled with gold, but everybody around you, that your story is powerful. And don't forget, you can pick up a copy of Finding His Voice on Amazon. An overcomer's journey from suicide to success. An overcomer's journey which launched this very movement. And last but not least, if you want to learn how to overcome, visit www.dannyjohnson.com. That's my coach, and that's where I learned how to overcome. Thank you so much for joining with us today. We believe in you, and we believe in the power of story. We believe in your story.